Good afternoon. I'm Jane Burrell with Public Programs at LACMA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the museum today and to the Times Talks at LACMA program. This conversation marks the beginning of a special collaboration between LACMA and the New York Times, who have brought their acclaimed Times Talks to Los Angeles. It is also part of a weekend celebration of art and film as we launch our new film program in partnership with Film Independent and strengthen the museum's commitment to the art of film. And today, as part of that weekend, we will be having a gala later this evening. So we have closed the west side of our campus. The east side is free, and we're giving free tickets after 3 o'clock. So after the lecture, I hope you'll stay and go through the galleries on the east side of campus. And now to tell you more about Times Talks and the conversation today, I'd like to introduce Carol Day from the New York Times.
Thank you, Jane, and welcome everyone. This is the third and final Times Talks of the weekend, and we are delighted to be launching our collaboration with the museum and bringing luminaries from film, politics, art, music, and ideas to Los Angeles for conversations with our journalists from the New York Times. Our guests today are two very special actors who both have had incredibly prolific and diverse careers in film and on stage. They have both received some of their industry's highest accolades, an Academy Award nomination, the Screen Actors Guild Award, and multiple Golden Globe Award nominations, plus a Tony Award nomination and many others. They are both appearing in a new film directed by Roman Polanski. It's a savage comic drama adapted from the acclaimed Broadway show God of Carnage, with one of the most high-powered ensembles around today. Their co-stars are Jodie Foster and Kate Winslet, and together the four of them are an incredible ensemble, and their individual performances are outstanding. The film has its LA premiere tonight, and we are fortunate to have the two of them with us here from Carnage this afternoon. You'll meet them and hear more about them in just a moment, but first I'm delighted to introduce our moderator. You know his byline from the paper and nytimes.com. He's the New York Times writer at large, and his articles appear everywhere, from Arts and Leisure to the Book Review to the Week in Review to sports. For 5 years, he was editor of the New York Times Book Review. And before that, he spent 23 years as fiction editor at The New Yorker. Last week, he profiled actress Charlize Theron for our Hollywood movie issue of Arts and Leisure, and he also profiled British author Alan Hollingsworth for the Times Book Review. So please join me in welcoming Charles Chip McGrath and our very special guests, John C. Reilly and Christoph Waltz. Thank you.
It's like a secret meeting in here.
We're
going to organize.
We just learned that we're sitting on methane gas. Did you know that? It says outside. We're here to talk about, is this working? Yeah, I guess so. We're here to talk about Carnage, but before we get there, I've got a couple of clips to show, just to remind us all how very talented these two actors are. And maybe we could talk a little bit about what they had done prior to Carnage. So if we can run the first clip, please, which would be from Inglourious Basterds. think we got the wrong clip. The wrong
Or
Nazi.
you got the wrong guy.
The wrong guy.
Which one was I?
Brad, I heard you grew a beard, but
It'll be very interesting to see what we get when we go to your movie. To be serious for a minute, I remember seeing *Inglourious Bastards*, and within about 10 minutes of seeing Christoph Waltz, I thought, oh my goodness, who is this guy? Why have we never heard of him before? I mean, it's one of the great startling debuts of the last, I don't know, how many years. So why hadn't we heard of you before? What were you doing?
I was far away. And that's why. America is big enough as it is. You don't need to look so far. It's just exposure, really. And
But you had been working in German TV and German theater.
I've been working in German-speaking theater, television, movies for something like 30-some years before I was presented to Quentin Tarantino. And he's the author and director of this beautiful clip that we just saw.
Were you sort of yearning for this kind of break, or did it just come out of the blue?
Well, I had been yearning for this kind of a break like 25 years prior to that, and then slowly adjusted my sense of reality. And over the subsequent years of my career, so I still don't believe it. And I'm aware of it, but I don't believe it, and I like that combination.
You're German, or German speaking rather. Did you have any reservations about playing a Nazi? Did that?
Well, I never played a Nazi before, and I dare say I'm not going to play another Nazi. It all depended on what Nazi, what kind of person, and that's how I like to look at it. You know, whether Nazi or not, Nazi, commie, anything. Because I think that's in a way the job to be done, to actually ask the very specific question, what is this? And not, hey, that's a Nazi, I know exactly what to do.
I was going to say, I mean, that's one of the things that's refreshing about the movie is that your character is not one of these blonde, blue-haired guys that goes around clicking his heels and going "Jawohl" all the time. It's a little more subtle. And presumably that's Tarantino, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, in all seriousness, he wrote this extraordinary part. That's a part that I always said that's a part on the same level as, you know, the great parts of dramatic literature all the way back. You know, this is the if you just look at it from the you know, extent of possibilities that an actor gets from a part like that, you know, it doesn't fall behind Richard III.
What is Tarantino like to work with? He's become such a legend in this country. There's so many stories about him. I don't think those of us who are not in the business have a very clear sense, other than that he's some kind of genius.
Which is, it's nice to say. I agree with that. He's some kind of a genius. I'm not perfectly sure what that is. It's amazing where this man draws his inspiration, and amazing in the true sense of the word, not in the fashionable sense of the word. It is mostly in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
That this extraordinary world comes into existence. And then he is an accomplished filmmaker, so he can turn that into a movie. But it's really, you know, how he puts his incredible inspiration onto the paper.
You were saying to me earlier in the green room that it took you a long time to figure out the the differences between movie making in Europe and movie making here, but now that you've figured it out, and you think that a lot of the cliches about Hollywood aren't true, is that?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the movie making. There are big differences, but not about the technical everyday aspects of movie making, because they are more or less the same. I mean, yeah, in Poland they're a little bit more all over the place than here. Yeah, but and that's not just on account of the difference in budgets. The process of filmmaking is what it is. Yet there was I quoted that before. Allow me to repeat myself. There was a German director in the 40s, 50s, who said the difference between movies in Germany and movies in America, as he sees it, is in Germany they're made like commodities and sold like art. And in America, it's exactly the other way around.
Right. That's Mr. Reilly, I went back recently doing my homework, and you have made a lot of movies. You have been a very busy guy, and your roles have been, you've been a porn star, a stock car driver, a beleaguered husband, a rock singer. I'm probably leaving.
Fisherman.
Fisherman, right. Right, perfect. Cop. And it also has seemed to me in a way that your career has evolved a little bit, in that for a while you were heavy, and then you were doing comic stuff, and then most recently in a movie I really love, Cyrus, has something else again, I think. So I wonder if we could see that.
Cross your fingers.
Am I right in thinking that that movie is a movement in a slightly different direction for you? That it is funny, but it's not just funny. That it's.
Yeah, well, I try to make every movement I make on film in a different direction than what I've done before. You're not always given that opportunity, but this was really, that movie, I'm glad you noticed it, because actually I'm especially proud of that movie because it was largely improvised. Dialogue-wise,
Really?
It was probably 90%
So
of
you
what
came
I'm
up. You
saying.
came up with Shrek on the
Yes,
spot?
and I regret it to this day. They immediately turned it into a commercial, and yeah, it just came right out of my psyche, my low self-esteem or something. But yeah, but it is kind of a fusion. I mean, I felt like when I finished that movie, I felt like, well, I could not have done that movie at any time. 15 years ago or last year, I could only have done that right now, and part of it was the process of freeing myself up on film to be able to improvise. And that really first started with Paul Anderson. There's a lot of improvisation in the Mills in the movies I made with Paul, and then it came on strong with Will Ferrell. The movies I made with Will was just we'd make it up out of whole cloth. You know, like the script, we do the scripted version once, and then it was just off to the races, whatever popped into our heads.
Is that partly because you grew up in Chicago, which is sort of the capital of improv? Were you part of that?
Well,
process?
I did go to acting school in Chicago, and I did study improvisation heavily, this Viola Spolin version of improvisation. which is less comedy-based and more just reality-based. It sort of teaches actors to be honest. But where I come from in Chicago, it was not by no means a cultural hotbed or a training ground for actors. If anything, it was just taught you how to run fast and duck at the right moments when the beer bottles would fly at you. Yeah, but Chicago is a great theater town, and when I got older, and there was, you know, you're right. Yeah, there's something in the water there.
Right. Do you, at this point, do you have a preference? Would you prefer comedy? Do you prefer the heavy stuff? Or do you just?
Well, I was joking to say I prefer to be employed, which is the truth, you know. And you want to be engaged, and you want to work with people that are inspired and take it as seriously as you do, and you want to do different things. I mean, I hope to keep evolving as a person and then as an actor too, you know, and have my work reflect that. So I don't think I really prefer one or the other. I think you could go back very early in my career, and there's a lot of funny stuff. A lot of times I was cast in more serious movies, but as somewhat of a comedic foil to what was going on, not necessarily a joke-based kind of comedy, but just these eccentric characters. So I don't know. I just feel like I try to tell the truth as much as I can, and if the circumstances are ridiculous, then I'm in a comedy. You know, it's like.
Well, in Carnage, you're in something that's sometimes a comedy, sometimes I don't know, a horror movie. It's really something. We're going to show a clip for that, and let me just quickly, for those of you who don't know the plot, let me quickly give you the gist. There's two couples, and Christoph is a lawyer. He's married to Kate Winslet, who's a stockbroker. John sells kind of high-end housewares.
Yeah, wholesale hardware stuff.
And he's married to Jodie Foster, who's a writer. And their two kids get in a playground scuffle, and the Waltz Winslet kid injures the Foster Reilly kid. And so John and Jodie, being very civilized, liberal, politically correct people, invite Christoph and Kate over to hash this out like civilized adults. We're not going to get angry. They're all you know, intelligent, sensitive people. And very quickly, civilization is gone, and they're at each other.
Scotch comes out.
Scotch comes out. And they're at each other's throats. So let's hope we have a scene from this. Let's try it.
That's kind of when it first starts to flare up, isn't it? Yeah.
And there, as I said, there are moments when it's extremely funny, and they say very funny things. And then the moments when it's so horrific you almost can't watch, but you have to because it's so amazing. What's interesting to me about many things are interesting, but the first thing is that this is adapted from a play that actually was a huge international hit. And came to America, I think, rather late in its evolution. And instead of opening the movie up the way filmmakers sometimes do when you have a play and trying to add other stuff and give you a sense of expansiveness, if anything, the movie is even tighter and more claustrophobic than the play. Because in the play, you're on a big stage. In this thing, the scene we saw in that hallway isn't entirely representative. For most of the movie, the four of you are in this tiny living room. And all of you are basically on camera, all four of you are on camera all the time. And so that has to be an extraordinary experience. I mean, do you get on each other's nerves?
It was extraordinary, yeah. I think what you're talking about in terms of the tension, it's almost as if the fourth wall is at your back as an audience member. Roman, I think, deliberately doesn't show shots from outside the building, or you're meant to be in this room with these people. And it was intense. It was very demanding, but I met three great friends, including Christoph, who we were all very supportive of each other. And I think, contrary to what you might think, a lot of times when you have to create conflict on camera or in a piece of theater, the only way you can really do that effectively is to be completely without conflict off screen or backstage, because it requires a level of cooperation and understanding, and you have to keep very clear emotionally, or else you just get frozen up and you can't do what you need to do. And there's an extremely high level of cooperation in this piece. The four of us, like you said, it's a real-time story. You start, and then we're there for 80 minutes, and you never cut away. There's never even a small time jump. So it required a pretty cooperative team.
I think if you're required to leave your comfort zone in what you're doing, you have to actually have it very firmly established amongst the people you're working with. Because otherwise, you always feel threatened, you always feel unsafe, it's always shaky ground. And this was almost a unique experience, maybe because we were just four, but there was not one who would not support the other. And it became like the precondition to actually really venture out into Polanski land, to kind of have the reassurance that yes, John and Kate and Jody, I mean in my case, say it's all right, you can go.
Was it intimidating? Here's the two of you, and then you've got a lot of Oscar hardware in that room. You've got two, arguably, of the greatest actresses of their generation. And you have some hardware too, but was that intimidating, or are they just such pros that it's...
No, that was actually, irrelevant in a way. Because that's part of this safe space, that hardware is not being thrown around. It's somewhere else. You don't need that to do. This was really the ideal of professionalism, not cold, not superficial, and not just energy and time efficient. It was really four grown-up actors working with each other. It very rarely happens.
It was very, very demanding. All of us, I think the four actors felt like, it's Roman Polanski, my God, like, if this doesn't work, it's not going to be his fault. The guy's been making great movies for 60 years, like, I'm the one holding the ball here, So I think, aside from all of our preconceptions about each other or anything, we all felt like, my God, I hope we are able to pull this off. And I think, if he's honest, Roman probably felt a great pressure himself, because the story, if you think about it, the story is a real-time story told in 80 minutes with no possibility of cutting away, of removing sections of the scenes, because the dialogue refers back and forth in the story constantly. It would be really glaring if you suddenly took a piece out. So it's a real high-wire act for a 78-year-old filmmaker with a lot of great credits to his name to be that gutsy, to take on something that could blow up in his face. I think all of us were aware of the challenge, and our past successes were, if anything, they were on the line, rather than brandished in the moment,
But it must be said that he's a 78-year-old filmmaker who, when having a back pain, lies down on the floor, puts his feet behind his back, grunts twice, and then snaps from there straight into standing back up. That's how 78 years old he is.
The takes were very long, right? I mean,
Not always.
No, okay.
A lot of times they're very short, but yeah, occasionally with some of the bigger monologues. Have you guys seen the film? Very few people have seen the film,
right,
so yeah. So there's long sections of where people are getting stuff off their chest, where Roman would let it run for 12 minutes, which is as long as you can run on a magazine of film.
Did you film it chronologically, or
Yes.
really straight through?
Straight through. We rehearsed it from beginning to end like a play, with run-throughs and everything, and then we started with the first thing you see in this movie.
So you get that-
in the screening is the first shot we did,
So you get-
and the last one is the last.
So you get that right, and then you move on to the next one. You don't.
Sometimes you have to go back, and if you change the setup, and you do the same thing again in a different direction. But that's all of the jumping about that we did. Other than that, we followed the chronology in a very, very consequent and stringent way.
It makes sense to me. I think that a viewer kind of intuits that, because one of the extraordinary things about the film is the way the tone and the mood is continually shifting. You know, your character starts off seeming kind of genial and harmless, and then not so. Your character starts seeming off kind of brusque and Teutonic and wants to get out of there, and then quickly it turns out your character has a sense of humor, and then it's a roller coaster ride, because a couple of times the Waltz Winslet couple starts to leave, and that's the kind of the rhythmic sway to this thing, and then they get dragged back for another go round. And as I was watching, I thought this would be very, very difficult to do if you were not doing it kind of in the order that it happened.
Yeah, we rehearsed it for 2 weeks beforehand. We sat at a table for a few days and read through it, and then we started to get on our feet. And then one day, Roman just announced, "All right, when you come back next time, I want you to have the whole thing memorized, and we're going to start running it all the way through." So all of us hopped to it.
Really? So you had to memorize it?
Yeah, we had the whole thing memorized, and we'd run it sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, just so we would get a sense of the arc of the story and the flow of the story.
We could have done it on a stage before we started shooting.
Yeah.
Maybe not a perfectly rounded performance, but we could have done it.
Well, it's interesting. So you were talking earlier about having this safe space where you can. So that's Polanski, right? I mean, he's creating that for you. Right?
Well, actually, that was more John, Kate, and Jody, and he was more jeopardizing it. But that's the idea.
Uh-huh.
That's the idea. He's very, very demanding, and even though he's extremely polite and very matter-of-factly, and he doesn't sort of delve into personal, in personal, neither positively nor negatively. John at one point asked him, well, because we made him our spokesperson at times when it was, difficult questions. He said, we were standing behind him though. He said to Roman, "Can you tell us just like a little bit how we're doing?" And he was grinning up at John, and he said, "Do you want me to stroke your ego?" That's as far as he goes in paying compliments.
Really? If you
It's not what I was looking for, by the way. Ego stroking. Because he was giving a lot of feedback to the photography and the lighting and the property guys, and I actually said, "Roman, how about the acting department?" And then he said that ego comment, and the next thing he said was, if something was not going well, you would know it, believe me. So, yeah.
Is he a perfectionist? I mean, you were talking about the camera work and the detail. I mean, one of the things when you watch this movie, it's kind of perfect. I mean, it's just...
He invented perfectionism.
But doesn't that make it...
Polanski means perfect in Polish, doesn't it? Yeah. Polanski.
So, how long did you rehearse it?
It was 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and some of that was sitting and reading through and talking about the translation and stuff, and then about a week. But then occasionally he would say, even once we started shooting, we all were like, oh, thank God we don't have to run that thing anymore. We can just make a normal movie now. He would announce, okay, we're going to stop filming midway today, and then we're going to run the rest of the story again, so that you have in your mind where we're going the following day. Yeah, he's a perfectionist, but he's right. And there's nothing worse than a perfectionist who's wrong, you know. But in his case, even if it was uncomfortable, or like, for instance, asking us to run the whole thing with 2 days' notice, you know, if you really looked at the situation, you're like, well, that's the right thing to do. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. And but where his perfectionism really manifested itself, to me anyway, was in the photography and the blocking and the marks. You know, a lot of times the actors, I heard this from Jack Nicholson when I worked with him. He would, when he did Chinatown with Roman, he said, hey, Roman's always gone on and on about the marks. You know, I said, marks are for pussies. And I'm like, you just, you know, the camera go find you. You know, I'm doing my thing. You just, you know, which must have driven Roman crazy, right? Because he was really, I mean, with us, very like, if your shoulder was a half inch that way, he'd be like, no, I told you have to be over here. Like, do it again. Like, something about the Polish accent, it always sounds like they're complaining a little bit, but they're not, but that's just how it sounds, you know. But then occasionally, we didn't watch the dailies or the rushes or anything, but occasionally he would show us something on the monitor, like, look, we've turned the camera around now, this is what we're trying to match. And you would suddenly see these compositions that he'd created, and like, oh my God, of course. Yeah, if my shoulder's over that way a half inch, then I block half of Kate's face. Like, wow, like, and that's when it occurred to me, like, this filmmaker tells stories through composition, which was a revelation to me somehow. A lot of directors I've worked with, it's almost accidental. Like they're trying to catch a moment, you know, and he's designed the moment so that it fits the frame exactly as he sees it.
It's the movie that tells the story, not the actor or the dialogue. It's the film. The film is the narrative, and not what's happening or you know, the dialogue or the explanations or illustration. There's not 1 second where Roman illustrates the plot or the dialogue, or it's pure film.
You were saying that you rehearsed for 2 weeks. That's uncommon, right? In movie
Well,
making?
yeah, you know, it is. Yeah, I would say it's uncommon, but not unheard of. You know, although I've had rehearsal processes on film that we're going to rehearse for 2 weeks, and then you get there and this big movie star who's the lead of the movie is like, yeah, man, I don't know, let's just talk a little bit. Like, okay, are we done? We don't want to waste it, right? I'm not going to say any names. But yeah, but you know, every director is different. Every movie is different, even with the same director. You know, I've worked with the same director a couple of times, and you're always on some level trying to reinvent the wheel, or you know, make a custom suit for a different body again, you know?
The process that you went through, did he help you with your characters? Did he help you find those characters? Did he, or was that something that you had to kind of figure out for yourselves?
Well, they're written already in a pretty precise manner. And you know pretty much what you have to achieve or rather what process you have to go through from reading it. And during rehearsal, we were sort of a little insecure, and sometimes I remember first time the whole thing ground to a halt. Roman said, "Don't stop, don't stop. I only stop when I have an idea." So, we just went ahead, and by doing it, you kind of slowly come to terms with it, and then slowly develop an economy. And from there, you can sort of move, and yeah.
He's a very good actor. So he's got great notes, acting-wise, but he did it all during rehearsal. He said very, very few things to me once we started shooting. And in fact, I think he might have said something weird to you at one point.
It wasn't weird at all. He said,
but
"Christoph, what you're doing is not funny."
Yeah, yeah. And with me, he snuck up behind me and he's like, "John." I was like, "Yes." And suddenly we're all alone. Like he's like, "Don't be too working class." And I was like, "What?" Oh, okay. Action. But anyway, so very few notes during the shooting other than these weird little pokes at us, But during rehearsal, he would, I would be doing something like, I needed to go over there and shake his hand, but I'm not meant to see him until I get over there. And I put this down, and so I'm ready to shake his hand. He goes, "Wait, what are you doing? Why did you put the water down? You don't know you're going to shake his hand. You put the water down because you as an actor want to get rid of the prop, but you don't know. You would carry it and put it down over there somewhere." He's like, God, he's right, totally busted, he's almost like a double agent, having been an actor, he knows all the little lazy things that happen. But
You just joked about actors and say, "Well, let's not rehearse too much. We don't want to leave it." But it occurs to me with a movie like this, isn't it possible to over-rehearse this? I mean, I think of how physically draining, especially the two female parts are when
To us, yes.
I mean, just how many times can Jodie Foster, turn red and have her veins twitch in her neck? I mean, or is that you can just always, if you're a great actor, you can just turn that on?
well, all of us. It's interesting you mentioned Jodie because Jodie hasn't done much theater. I don't think. I mean, she's done so much from an early age. But Christoph, Kate, and I all had theater backgrounds, so theater actors can't rehearse enough. Let's do it again. But I mean, my personal belief about rehearsal is that you either need to rehearse it so you're just about to crest and then start filming, or you need to rehearse it so much that you crest and you fall down again and then you start to crest again and then film it. You know what I mean? It's either got to be really rehearsed or just kind of rehearsed. But if you get to that flat spot where you're becoming bored with the material and the director's sick of seeing you doing it and you haven't pushed through to that next level, then I think you're in trouble. But yeah, I think we were right. What do you think?
No, we could have rehearsed some more.
How long did the actual shooting take place? How long did that last? So you rehearsed for 2 weeks, and then how long did it take to make the film?
6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Yeah, that's an advantage of being well rehearsed. You can shoot quicker.
But 6 weeks seems like a long time for 80 minutes. I mean, except it's 80 perfect minutes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Had it been 6 months, and, you could still say the same thing. 6 months kind of long for 80 minutes, but I mean, I personally could have done it for 6 months because it was so exciting. Because it really more and more and more into the microscopic realm, and I find that really, really exciting.
I would have had a mental breakdown if it went any longer than it did. Honestly, I was already, as it was, by week 6, I had this little scooter, and I would go scooting out of the soundstage every time we got 10 minutes off, and just go outside and catch some air. It was, I mean, bless your heart, but to me, I really felt like I was going slowly mad. It felt like an actor's anxiety dream, like you're shooting a scene that's never done, like every day, the same clothes, the same people, the same, like, it started to make me a little crazy by the end.
We need to take some questions, but just one more question for me first, which is, to me, one of the really interesting things about this film is it's a true ensemble piece. All 4 of you are carrying your weight. I mean, it seems to me sometimes in movies, especially where you have such talented people as Kate Winslet or Jodie Foster or Christoph Waltz, there might be a temptation to coast, to let them do it. But this doesn't happen here.
There's no coasting possible in this piece, because even if you weren't the one talking, your reaction was as interesting to Roman as what the person was saying. So that's I always.
No, that's one of the things the movie
Yeah.
does so well, because the reaction, the person reacting is always right there.
Yeah, and I just felt like, God damn, another day on the hot seat, no matter what I'm doing. Like, most movies you get a day where you're just, walking down the street doing exterior silent shots or something, and it's like a palate cleanser, but this was nonstop, hot seat.
So we're going to take some questions now, but you have to come up here to the front and use a microphone, not because we can't hear each other in this room, but because they're taping this. So, but where is the other mic? Do we know?
It's like a presidential debate.
Right.
Hi, I'm Dorothy
Well,
from
then
Iowa.
here's what we'll do. If
What do you plan to do?
So the mic is here on the stage right, and if you just come up and
Not too intimidating. Just right under the spotlight there.
right.
Okay, a question for Christoph and your training. I had read that you were trained by both the Max Reinhardt Institute and the Strasberg Institute. What benefits did you receive from each one, and do you have a preference of the U.S. style over the Reinhardt style?
The first answer will answer the second one. The benefit I derived from both equally is steer away from orthodox schools of anything.
Thank you.
Very well prepared question. Very confidently delivered.
Christoph, you may have just answered my question partly, but I was wondering if both of you could talk about some of the lessons that you learned early in your careers the hard way, that you wish you'd learned an easier way, or that you'd learned earlier.
Always pee when you have to go. Don't wait and think, because then you'll be shooting a scene like, I really got to pee, but I can't go now. That's one of them. I'm not even kidding.
It's very important. What I can contribute is not that important. Success and the work don't have anything to do with each other. Nothing. Not even remotely. That's something that takes a while to get used to.
So how do you keep yourself going then when you're working but you're not having success?
By peeing in time.
This question for Mr. Waltz. My name is Kelly. I'm here on behalf of representing ChristopHWaltzFans.com. And
Thank you. Welcome.
I didn't know you were bringing your fan club. You better let my people in now. They're going to be blocking traffic.
First off, we'd like to say we're glad to see you recovering from your recent accident. Your most recent films, you have played some very intimidating, terrifying, and I won't use the V word, antagonist in the films. And we're kind of wondering who came up with Der Humpink?
That was the Jimmy Kimmel people. They had this idea. I'm not that funny, unfortunately.
Thank you.
I was wondering if, of the four of you, any of you had seen the performance on stage beforehand, and did that hurt or benefit seeing that, or if you hadn't seen it, did you avoid seeing it?
I had not seen it. I had read the play. I've been approached about the play, but I couldn't do it. But hadn't seen it, and I was really glad I hadn't, because I wanted to, James Gandolfini is a great actor, and I think that would have clouded my brain. So, Christoph?
Well, I've seen it years before. I've seen, as a matter of fact, the original production, which happened to have been in Zurich. It was translated into German first, and then they had their first premiere in Paris. But that was a long time ago, and as much as I liked it, I had forgotten it.
I think that the answer is that they're really very different. I mean, the play is a play, and this part of what Polanski has done here is he's turned it into a movie. And the performances are different. I mean, it's worth going to again, even if you've seen it.
This one is for John. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the movie Terry and your experience on that film?
Well, thanks. That's the person who saw it in L.A. And you, of course. I thank both of you.
If I didn't put up Cyrus, I was going to put up Terry.
Oh, thank you. That is a film that was produced by my wife. So that's how it came to me. She got this manuscript that was written by the writer Patrick DeWitt, and then he and the director Ozza Jacobs turned it into a script, and I just always wanted to play a guidance counselor, and there it arrived. So, but thanks. I'm very proud of that movie. I hope people don't forget it.
Did you have unpleasant experiences with guidance counselors as a youth?
No, not unpleasant. Just it's an odd relationship
Right.
for a young person. It's this person. They're not really an authority figure, but they're not a kid. I remember I actually had very few interactions with my guidance counselor. I went to Boys Catholic High School, and the first meeting, this guy's name was Mr. Cumming, which was an unfortunate name at a Boys Catholic High school. He was only to be outdone by my world history teacher, Mr. Bader. But anyway, Mr. Cumming said on our first meeting, listen, I want you to know you can tell me anything. I got kids coming in here telling me they're sick of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch, and I got kids coming in here telling me they got their girlfriends pregnant. And I was like, boom, boom, like, girlfriend? Pregnant? Like, when I get a girlfriend, I'll try to avoid that. Anyway.
Hi. So you both come from a theater background, and I'm a studying theater student, and it's really funny you brought up the fact of hitting marks, because we're actually taking a screen acting class right now, and I'm having a really hard time. We spent the whole last class, all 3 hours, practicing hitting marks, and I was just about to tear my hair out because I didn't understand the point or what. Why I was there for 3 hours doing that in an acting class, but it's really interesting that you tied it into the director's vision and the composition and why it was so important, and it finally came to light. But I feel like those experiences are rare when you work with especially in film, a film director who really has a vision and is a good perfectionist. And I'm wondering how do you take what you've learned from theater and your background and bring it to film, because I feel like everywhere I go when I try to do a film thing, everything I've learned in theater is kind of shot to they're like, that doesn't matter, don't worry about that, and it's throwing me in my passion.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that actors have, that theater acting and film acting, two very different things. But in fact, I think that's a lie. I think they're actually the same thing. It's just you have to get into the practice of gauging your audience. If you're talking to 6 people behind a camera, then you're talking to those, your voice can be this size and your movements can be this size. And if you're talking to 6,000 people in an amphitheater, you have to accommodate them so that they can hear you. But you want to get better at marks, because it's not just perfectionists that use marks. It's a necessary thing. You're dealing with this piece of equipment that if you're not in the right place, you're not in focus. So, but here's a good trick. Bad actors do this. They walk up, you'll see them walk up and then, hey. Okay, but what you do is you go to your mark, and then you go, count the number of steps back to where you were going to begin. So 1, 2, 3. And now you just don't move your feet and go 1, 2, 3, and you're going to be pretty much there. That's my little trick.
I do it the other way. As a matter of fact,
no, do you remember?
Roman once came and said, Christoph, I saw the dailies and you're looking at your mark. I said, Roman, the last time I looked at a mark was probably around 1978. He said, what is it? What is this thing that you have with marks? What's wrong? You know, why are you always getting excited? You know, I had actors who hit the mark 100% every time, and that was it.
Hi, this is a question for John. Considering that the role you were nominated for in Chicago and also Golden Globe nominated with Rock Hard, I mean, you have a real talent musical-wise. You know, like especially in Rock Hard, just all the different genres that you've dealt with. In regards to seeking out music-related roles, do you just have the project come to you? Do you seek the project, or is it just something that has to happen naturally?
This is Jeremy from johncreilly.com.
No, actually, it's a question I meant to ask. It's a very good question. And
do I seek out music on purpose? I'm sorry, I was too busy concocting that joke to listen to what you said.
I'm sorry. Just like if like something like Rock Hard just has to come to you, or like is it something that you actually just seek out on the side?
I think if you engage as an artist, all the things that you have to give will eventually be asked of you. And music is something, I grew up doing musicals. That's where I learned to be an actor. Before I decided that serious actors didn't do musicals for a while, for a dark period while I was in drama school. That was something I just always did. You know, like where I grew up in Chicago, no one was doing Ibsen, or you know, it's like it was all Hello Dolly and Brigadoon, and you know that's what you did. You had, and if you wanted to be a kid doing theater, you had to sing and dance, and so that stuff just kind of came to me because and I do seek it out. I do play music in my, when I'm not working as an actor, so. I just feel really lucky when it comes about. I wish there were more movie musicals made.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a film student at USC pursuing like directing, and so for actors, I'm wondering what are some tips for communication that a director should know? And because you mentioned that Polanski had a very specific style as far as not giving you a lot of feedback while filming. So how did you work with that? And what were the notes in rehearsal that you mentioned were really helpful? What was it about them that helped you the most?
Can I give a little hint? If you're a director talking to actors, don't pretend you know about acting just because you've read a book. Demand whatever it is that you want from them as a director, and then they'll figure it out how to do it. Unless you really know better than them, like Roman Polanski does, don't pretend.
I think the most important thing for a director, from my point of view as an actor, is to have an audience member behind the camera. You'd be amazed. It's such a huge technical enterprise that everyone is worrying about all their little departments, and oftentimes the director is just worrying about the frame or interacting with the DP or whatever. It's really encouraging to have just to know that there's one person back there who's just sweatily wrapped up in what you're doing and noticing what you're doing and in the moment, the differences from the last take and whatever. It's amazing how easy it is for directors to forget that. Like, I've got to pay attention between action and cut, to what the actors are doing. It's not to say that Roman didn't pay attention; he certainly did. But yeah. Anyway.
Hi. I suppose this is both a question for John and Christoph. Between working with Martin Scorsese in Gangs of New York and Quentin Tarantino in Inglourious Basterds, how do you think they deliver tension in those movies with the drama, which is very much larger than in a scale of Polanski, and now working on Carnage? Do you see a difference in how you portray that tension on the screen or that kind of drama in an action movie versus, something happening in an apartment?
It's kind of an action movie.
And you've got some pretty contained indoor scenes in Inglourious Basterds.
I don't think a panorama shot of Grand Canyon is necessary to make it a movie. I think our movie is more of a movie than most of the sort of spectacles that take you around the world, because it's they want to display production value. I think this is more cinematic than a lot of action that we see on screens, that apart from the fact that most of it is computer generated. But I think this is true, pure cinema, and the rest is kind of fairground attraction.
I think you said, how do these people achieve tension? And I think one of the ways they do it is through, this is another thing that many directors blow. They really blow this moment, which is like, there's all this preparation, there's rehearsal, and there's months of meetings and financing and all this stuff that goes into this moment, and which is the moment of roll camera, action. And then those precious few, at the most 12 minutes after that moment, they have to be treated with a sacred, attention, or at least a reverence for what's going on. Not to stoke the actor's ego or whatever, but because that's the moment when the thing's going to happen that you've all been preparing for. That moment, And so someone like Martin Scorsese demands absolute silence among the crew. I worked in Italy with him, and that's a lot to ask of Italians, to absolute silence, And I heard that Quentin collects people's cell phones in a box on the set.
One phone was going off one day, and he broke off the shoot for the day. He said, "That's it. If you want to telephone, bye." And that was that.
And Roman, the same thing. He's like, now we're going to do it. It's a sense of occasion, and a lot of times, especially with the new digital cameras where they just roll and roll and roll, you have to. If you're going to be a director, you have to remind yourself and the people working with you that, fidget all you want and update your status all you want on your time, but in this moment, right now, we're going to put all our attention on this moment. I hope that something magical happens.
Thank you.
I think that's a good place to end. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And hope that something magical happens.